interesting for everybody. We're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about something slightly more technical. I'm Rebecca, and this is me in my natural habitat, usually on a bicycle. While I'm riding, I'm usually very passionate about things like brains and languages and technology and how we use them, particularly in a professional situation. So when I'm not on my bicycle, I'm the product marketing manager at Oncrawl, which for me is a great fit because it uses all of those passions and channels them into something that is useful for you. If you're not familiar with Oncrawl, we are an enterprise SEO platform that contains an SEO crawler, a log analyzer, and connections that allow you to blend that data with the other data that is important to you on your site. So today I'm here to talk about not my bikes and not particularly Oncrawl, but that crystal ball of what comes next and how do we see what's coming, how do we predict something in SEO. So in order to do that, I wanted to give you some concrete examples, and we're going to look at this site, transfer-learning.ai. This is what it looks like. This site, we have a few things that I wanted to tell you about this site. I can remember them. First, it's a collection of machine learning articles that have been published in scholarly journals, and they're collected here with a good summary. So not just the abstract, but really a summary of what the article is about, their themes, the authors, and most importantly, connections to the machine learning and data training that you can get online in order to be able to understand that article. It's a WordPress site. It's actually a really young site. I think we have about 15 months of data, so we can't go back too far. It has about 100,000 articles, of which I think about 40% are actually indexed, most of them on very long-tail queries. And this is not a professional site in the sense that somebody's earning money off of it in the context of their daily job. So there's no SEO here. It's a great site to use as an example because I'm not criticizing anybody's work here. It's a sandbox site that does have the technical basics to make sure that it is indexed. But the idea behind it is from my coworker, this guy, Vincent Terrazi, who is a super fun person to work with because he asks really crazy questions like, can BART-generated useful content rank? And then creates a site, and you're looking at the clicks and impressions from the search console for this site. So the answer to that question is probably yes, but that's really another story. What I really wanted to talk about today is how can we use prediction. And just before we start, I am looking at clicks from search consoles. And the reason I'm doing that is because this site is not a business site. So I don't have revenue information. I don't have ROI. So one of the best things to look at in terms of site performance is who is coming from SEO. And one of the easiest ways to get that is from Search Console. The methods that we're going to look at apply no matter what metric you're using. So if you have revenue data, use that. That's a great way to see where you're going and what your site is. So when we want to project something in SEO, we can do two things. We can speed up time and fast forward into the future, see what's coming next that has never happened before. Or we can rewind to a given point in the past and see where we could have gone from there. The example here is Vincent's host, his provider, said to him, you know what? We're mid-May and I did not sign up for a WordPress site this big. Can you stop publishing articles this frequently? So he did. And did that have an impact, or is that something else going on? You can use prediction to look at that and find out what's happened. Similarly, we know this summer there have been a ton of Google updates. Did they have an impact on your site? Rewind to that point and play it again, see what happened. So with that, this is what we did. Don't start from scratch if you're doing this, particularly if you're new to it. There are so many tools, so many people, and so many things that have already been done. It's really easy to find somewhere to start. I started with Oncrawl Labs because it was easily available to me. It can easily be available to you. It's our R&D platform. You need our API, but otherwise it's there for you. Oncrawl Labs is actually a collection of Python notebooks that come from our R&D. They're meant as examples to show you what we're doing, what we're working on, that you can adapt to your site and your situation. They've already been documented and tested. You know they work, so you can pick out the blocks that you want. So one of these is the long tail prediction. And basically it takes a time series, which if you're not familiar with time series, it's basically a list of dates or times with data matched to each point. And I know that I don't want to look at long tail, and I don't necessarily want to use all of the bits here, but this notebook will let me initialize the libraries I want, grab my data from Google Search Console, split the data into the part that I want to predict from and the part that I might want to use to test that prediction, make my prediction, check the prediction, and then graph the results. So I'm going to use that and modify it. The first modification I wanted to make was to remove the multi-word query part, so I just got rid of this. I also wanted to experiment a little bit, so I decided not to use the method that was already in this notebook, and I took out profit. And actually, I ended up using it both ways, with and without profit. So what I used to replace profit is cats. If you are not familiar with cats, that's normal, but it's really cool. At the time that I wrote this presentation, I think it was still in version 0.1.0. So it's new, and it's something to check out if you're using time series. It's sort of the one-stop shop from Facebook. It collects a series of different forecasting models. So if profit doesn't work for you, you've got something else ready for that. Different detection methods and other tools that you might need to use with cats. I did this in Python. If you're not a Python person, that's fine. I just didn't want to learn R for this. So there are two things we can do. Let's start with fast forwarding. And when we fast forward into the future, there's a major caveat. This is your crystal ball. And crystal balls, as we all know, give you a future that is imaginary, that is not necessarily realistic. For example, your site migration that you've spent the past 7 months working on, or changing your CMS that you really need to do, that's not going to happen. The global pandemic, that is not going to appear in this future. The 4,500 some Google updates per year, they don't exist in this future either. And your competitor's super brilliant campaign that completely changed the SERPs, that's not going to happen either. So this might be a positive future. But what can we do with a future that we know is not realistic? Actually, what this type of projection gives us is where we're headed if we don't change anything. So what it tells us is how much effort we need to put into changing that future. So it's great in a bunch of cases, like a site that is new to you. Where is it going? What should be your priorities to get it off that track if you want to? If you're on a great track, what can you prioritize? You can prioritize in-depth projects that might not have an immediate response. Or if you're sort of in free fall at the moment, it's a great way to argue for change, particularly if you're talking to people who aren't used to SEO. So that might be your managers, your clients. It gives them a much more concrete view of why you want to make a change. So what does the future look like? In order to predict this, what we did do is we chopped off the last 20 days and adjusted the settings for our predictions to make sure that those last 20 days were predicted correctly. Don't be afraid of the code if you're not a technical person. I just want to point out a few things in it. This is the code that actually launches the prediction and then graphs it. First, we're using profit here, so we're not into cats yet. Second, we found that with a yearly seasonality for this site, we got much better results, even though we don't have a significant amount of back history. There is already a seasonal trend present. And we wanted to predict the next month or so, the next 30 days. So this is the result. If you're not familiar with these types of graphs, what you're looking at are the black dots are the actual data, month by month. We can see the blue, which is dark blue line, which is the trend. We can see this is a weekly trend. So every week we have a peak in the middle of the week and a low point on the weekends. And the light blue is the variability. Where the black dots end over here, you can see the prediction. And we see that despite the fact that here we had a really worrisome looking downward trend, it's predicting an upward lift. And that's actually because of the seasonality, which is on this site very logical. It's a very academically oriented site. So the summer where there's less academic activity, we might expect a lower trend. So the conclusion here is that if I'm working on an SEO strategy for this site, yes, I want to be concerned about that downward trend, but it doesn't mean I should drop everything to fix it right now. I'm going to be very cautious over the next month or so, but I should expect an upward lift. One of the reasons to do this with machine learning is that machine learning is that much more sensitive to patterns rather than a human eye, which might get distracted by something that looks worrisome like that downward line. The other thing we can do with this is rewinding. Rewinding is fun because we get to take another look at what happened. We can actually go back and play it again. It helps us quantify the impact of something that we know occurred in the past and understand how and whether outside changes had an actual impact on our site itself. So let's go back to the example where we had to stop publishing articles because our host did not want any more bandwidth going on. We know that that happened on the 20th of May. Did that have an impact on impressions? Did it have an impact on clicks? So first what we want to know is when, if something happened, when did it happen? Is there a change in clicks around that period? So we know the date that our change happened for our editorial strategy. So we're going to look at a window of 30 days before and after that date to see if a machine learning model is sensitive enough to detect a change in trends in clicks around that time. So we ask for a decrease. We can, if we don't specify anything, it'll find either a decrease or an increase. If we ask for an increase, in this case, it probably won't find anything. And this is the result. So the blue area is your window that we were looking at, the 30 days before and after, and the red line is the decrease that it found. This is not particularly clear, so you can actually get the data from this point. This is the graph of it. And when I ask for example, the start time, it gives me a date. This is 2 days after I stopped publishing articles. I have a change in clicks. Actually, 1 day afterwards, I had a change in impressions. So I'm pretty sure that this is linked. And a 99.999 some confidence level that this is where the descent is. I also have the index, which is going to be really useful for what's coming up next. So when we talk about a time series as a list of dates and times with data associated with those dates, the index is the line number. So if I know where the line number is, it's really easy to tell in the next step that I want to split my data before that line and after that line. So what if we never stopped publishing articles? What would happen? And here we're going to use cats to explore that question. And this is the result. Before, you'll remember that we had a downward trend in clicks. It's no longer present. So let's look at that again. Here I went back to profit and overlaid the blue dotted, the black dotted line here is the actual data. So by the end of those 3 months after we stopped publishing articles, we can see that there's a significant difference. And that's what happens when you rewind and play something again. So let's recap that briefly. Working with time series is really cool because there are a ton of things you can do and there are a ton of tools that you can use to do it. It can give you all sorts of insights, forwards, backwards. If you're moving forward, you're using a future that doesn't exist. So what you're going to be looking at is how to get out of that future, how to improve that future. But it gives you a baseline. When you look backwards, you're looking at what changed and how much of that change was an impact. This can be something positive. It can be an SEO change. You can see how much you actually impacted your site compared to the version of the future, the past, where that change never happened. Or you can use something like we just saw today, where it's a negative impact. And you can see how much that actually impacted where you're going. And you can also do this much, much better. This is one way to do it. But you can also, if you're really interested in looking at that difference between what happened and what could have happened, use causal impact, which is what you're looking at here. It's a really, really quickly generated version of it, where you have the black is what actually happened, the red is the prediction, and the last section here, just behind me, is the difference between what is predicted and what is actually measured. You can also use tools for this. To cite two fairly random examples, Charlie Varnier with Streamlit has Stream Profit, which essentially does the same thing for you. It looks really, really interesting. It might be worth checking out. And if you're allergic to Python and that type of thing, you can also do this in Sheets. Andrew Charlton has a free Sheets that will let you do that. And I think he set up a site to collect all of those last night. So this sort of thing is new and available. And don't be afraid of it. You can also join us at Oncrawl. You'll remember I started from Oncrawl Labs, where we make this type of work available. We do offer a free trial, or you can come to our stand and say hello. I'd love to see you there. So thank you very much. If you want to talk to me, I'm available. I'll be here at our stand, or you can catch me on Twitter.